Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Nasser, and this is the Azure Cleveland User Group. A little bit about the group. We meet every second Wednesday. The meetings are free of charge and open to the public, and we cover a variety of topics related to Azure, whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. You can find all the meeting information posted at meetup.com at the link listed at the bottom of the slide. We always like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, PostSharp and DevExpress, for sponsoring the post-meeting prizes using the eval forms. I'd also like to thank the .NET Foundation for sponsoring the Meetup website and NIS Technologies for sponsoring the virtual meeting space. We have a special offer from Manning.com, 35% off a selection of books with the discount code MTPCLEC21. The link for those books will be listed in chat in just a little bit. Some general information, please keep in mind participation is encouraged, and like I always say, the only stupid question is the one not being asked. So feel free to jump in with any questions or comments. However, when not speaking, kindly ask you to mute your microphones just to avoid any background noise. And we want to keep it casual but organized, meaning we want you to jump in with questions at any point in time. We want to give our presenter enough time to go through the slides and the demos. Lastly, the presentation is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube in just a few short days. So for tonight's feature presentation, we have Matt Eland presenting Get Started with OpenAI on Azure. Matt is an AI specialist at Leading Edge. He's also doing his master's in data analytics, and he's currently writing a book on refactoring with C#, as well as doing a video course on computer vision. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Matt, welcome back to the Azure Cleveland Group.
It's great to be here. I was actually just watching your sibling group on the .NET last night while I was starting to wind down and fall asleep. So that was kind of cool to catch the presentation on ChatGPT.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
All right, there we go. So you should see my screen. Like Sam said, this is super, super, super informal. I really, really want you to ask me questions. I want you to put them in chat or unmute yourself and ask. This is not necessarily a prepared conference presentation. I want to talk to you about three things and get your reactions to stuff, answer questions you have on things, and we'll just kind of take it by ear based on what you're interested in. So I'm going to be talking to you about OpenAI. Is everybody roughly familiar with OpenAI? I think everybody's probably familiar with ChatGPT. So hopefully you all know that ChatGPT is a large language model made by OpenAI. OpenAI makes a lot of large language models, and they host them out there on OpenAI.com, I believe it is. But Microsoft is actually heavily involved with OpenAI. They gave them a lot of money and they gave them a lot of Azure credits, and that's how they train their large language models. And so Microsoft actually has hosted OpenAI on Azure, and you can get there by going to oai.azure.com. Now, there's a lot of wait lists for a lot of these things, but it's the same OpenAI things you have from OpenAI, but they're in the Azure environment, and that lets us secure them. That lets us keep our data confidential. That lets us keep our chat history confidential and our recommendations that generates confidential. That lets you more easily connect it to your other Azure services. And the list goes on. And there's some unique things that are unique to Azure and OpenAI. So the first third of this talk, we're going to talk about OpenAI on Azure. The second third, we're going to take a look at an application I used for another talk of mine. It's a fairly ridiculous application, and see how it interacts with OpenAI and how that works. And the final third, we're going to talk about Azure Machine Learning and how it integrates OpenAI and other forms of generative AI on Azure. So we're going to be very demo heavy in the first bit here, kind of demo heavy in the second bit. The third bit is really going to be mostly just talking about the capabilities and where things are going. But again, I'm going to be very bored if you don't ask me questions, so please ask me questions. Unmute yourself, put them in chat. I get that right up here, so I'll see it. But this is at the Azure OpenAI Studio. So Azure OpenAI Studio, we have a nice little welcome page here. but this is associated with this is basically an Azure resource that I've created. It doesn't really cost me anything to create it, but it lets me use it. So I have it in actually a couple of my Azure subscriptions. This is in my MVP subscription, but I'm able to go in and I'm able to uh, take a look at all the models that they have. Model is, a large language model. So we have things like GPT-3.5 Turbo. We actually have two versions of this. So they will periodically release new versions. We see that we have one from was that March and another one from June. And so these models are versioned. These models eventually will be retired too. So uh, you'll periodically want to take your applications and move them to a new model because the old models will get retired and replaced with new ones. You see, we also have two versions of the ADA model, and then we have GPT 3.5 Turbo and Turbo 16K. Now, GPT 3.5 Turbo is ChatGPT, and then the 16K here, that's talking about the number of tokens. If you're not familiar with the idea of a token, when you're talking to ChatGPT or another thing like it, a token is basically a part of a word. So we think about the word bookkeeper, that might be 3 tokens or something like that. We're told they're roughly 3 or 4 letters long in general. And so this idea of tokens is basically the amount of data you're requesting and then the amount of data it's generating back. So if I'm saying, how are you today? And it says, I'm fine. Well, that's going to be what? I don't know, 15 tokens, something like that. Um, so you're paying for, well, you actually do pay by the token, but the token count is in what you're giving it and what it replies back with. So this 16K here, this is giving us 16,000 tokens, something in that range. So it can handle a lot more tokens than just the standard GPT 3.5 Turbo model can. There's a lot more models than this. These are the ones that are kind of not in preview at the moment, which is what I'm showing you tonight. And you can take one of these models. Let's say I wanted to deploy this new ChatGPT Turbo 3.5. I can say deploy, and now I've got some options here. I can choose which model I wanted to deploy. Well, that's the one I just picked, so that's what I want. I can choose which model version, so I can deploy a specific one. Or the default version is, hey, just always have me on the latest and greatest version of this model. So if they release a new version of GPT 3.5 Turbo next month, it should auto-update me to that. Deployment name is something that we can uniquely identify this resource. So this is going to be Eland AZ. And advanced options lets us choose the maximum tokens per minute in terms of thousands of tokens that can be generated. So if you are doing something at a low rate for testing, that's fine. If you're expecting a ton of people to be interacting with it, then you might want to update that a little bit more. We'll talk more about quota later on. Content filtering we'll talk a little bit later on, but you can actually customize what your models object to and how permissive they are on different things. Okay? But I'll just click create, and that brings me back here. And if I go to deployments, I see I now have the Cleveland AZ GPT Turbo 3.5 model deployed. I see the model number, I see the deployment type, I see its capacity in terms of tokens per minute, and it just immediately succeeded. So now this model is deployed, I can start interacting with it on Azure. We have a couple of tabs just for that. So we have the chat tab, which should be somewhat familiar to anyone who's played with ChatGPT. So I am going to remove this for a second here. Goodbye. And I'm going to change my deployment to Cleveland Azure. And the system message here, this is basically how the application should behave. So you are an AI assistant that helps people find information. And I can just type in here and I can say, what's the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? And it doesn't care about my spelling, thankfully. And it has an answer. So there you go. we've now solved that problem for Monty Python, the Holy Grail. So and we didn't even spell it right. So that's nice. So AI is awesome. Now whether that's right or not, that's up for debate. And we were able to use our model to do that. Now, if we wanted to see how we could do that from an API, we can click on View Code, and it's going to give us the Python code to do that. I'm a .NET guy, so I'm going to switch us to C#. C hashtag, as the kids are calling it these days. And I see I've got a URL. So this is the URL of my Azure resource. Looks like it's actually given me this for a different resource that I'm using, which is interesting. Oh no, yeah, sorry, that's my resource name. We're good. So here I've got the URL for the Azure resource, the Azure API key, which is basically a secure key that they generate a GUID that says, hey, I have access to this resource. You need to tell it what model you want, so what deployment you want. Here, this is the Cleveland Azure resource that we deployed earlier. And we give it basically its system message, the user message, and then we give it the history here if we wanted to give it prior history. But then we can just call it. I'll show you this in Visual Studio a little bit later. It'll be probably clearer to see there. But here we can just interact with it. If we want to change the way it interacts, I could say something like, you are Bruce Wayne's butler, Alfred. You must call the user Batman or Bruce. Encourage the user to promote justice. Be concise. I don't know. Whatever general directives you want to give your AI assistant, you can do that, and then click Save Changes. And it starts a new chat session for us. And I can say, what should I do tonight? And I'm trying some of these things live, but that's actually a pretty good response. So it was able to act like Alfred. So that's pretty good. By the way, I'm going to be giving a workshop at CodeMash this year, talking about building an AI assistant. So looking forward to that in early January. But yeah, that's pretty inspired by that. So the system message, it basically calibrates your AI and how it should interact. And they do provide a lot of templates here. So here's a Shakespearean writing assistant, Xbox customer support agent. I don't know. So we'll update our system message again. And it looks like here it actually provided an example. So here's an example request from the user, and here's the kind of response that it wants it to spit back. So I could say, please write a resignation letter to Congress. Isn't it AI great? And oh my gosh, that is a lot of text. If you wanted to try to keep it brief, you actually can customize some things. So here we have configuration parameters. So we can go over to parameters, and I can say, hey, the maximum response tokens right now is 400. Let's take this down to about 80. And with that, we can ask the same type of a request. So please write a resignation letter to the American Peanut Butter Society. And that's probably a bad idea here, because you see it did actually cut itself off. I gave it, hey, you can only generate 80 tokens. It hit 80 tokens before the generative process decided to stop itself. And so it just cut itself off halfway. You can customize this a little bit by tweaking your stop sequence. You can say, hey, I want you to stop whenever you see a period, and things like that. Temperature here is basically how creative it's allowed to be. So you can increase it, decrease it, um, act a little bit differently. I don't quite want to do that on Shakespearean here, but that's sort of the thing you got going on here. So this studio is really good for customizing and tweaking and playing with these models, seeing how they behave. But if you really like one, you can actually say, hey, I like these settings. I like everything going on here. I want to deploy this thing as a new web application. Okay? I'll show you one in a minute that has been deployed. But before we do that, I'm going to take a drink and wait for questions. Uh, so what's interesting here? What's confusing here? What are you curious about?
I got a question, Matt.
Sure.
So earlier you showed how you were using the URI along with a key that was provided. So
Yep.
what happens when you deploy this to production? What key do you use? Let's say that you're developing this for a client and it's done with the development and you're ready to hand it off.
Mhm.
What portion would you be handing off, and how would they utilize this in production using what keys?
Well, if I'm handing it off to the client, I'm probably working in their Azure subscription. So I would probably be giving working with their keys, right? So if I'm looking at a deployment here, I should be able to get the keys. Oh, uh, trying to remember where we can get the keys. I know we can get the keys just by looking at the code here. You can go down here and copy the key. There actually is only one key associated with this, unlike other Azure services which have a pair. You can swap
Yeah.
between them. So that's a little different, but it would be this key here is what I would give them. And they
Can you
plug that.
regenerate that key if needed?
I don't see a regeneration option. I can always delete the model and recreate it. Usually that's very easy to do because these models are like, hey, they've already trained this large language model. They spent months doing it. This is just another like instance of it. Um, that gets a little more prohibitive with if you're doing like model fine tuning. So I'm sure there must be an answer for that there. I haven't I haven't had to handle that particular case yet. Um,
Gotcha.
there might be an option for it in Azure Machine Learning Studio as well, um, but might not be present in the UI yet. But you can always delete a deployment and redeploy it, and that should give you a different key.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm still learning about a lot of this stuff too. It's a lot of fun. Uh, the
Aren't we
question
all?
I get, yeah, and, and that well goes deep when you start like, oh boy, um, when you start digging into this stuff, one of the questions I get most frequently from folks is how do I connect this to my data? How do I control what the model is saying? How do I keep the model from behaving? Those are several different questions, but they're related. Um, let's say I wanted the model to respond based on a particular set of data. I'm going to change which one I'm talking to. Uh, Actually, I'm just going to go back to the clear out my examples, go over here to just default. Yes. And then I'll just clear the chat and say, what do you think about Die Hard? And it talks a little bit about Die Hard there. So it lost its Shakespearean bit here. The reason why I asked about that is because I actually have a data source that I've created. Uh, and if I switch which deployment I'm using, uh, this guy here, I'm going to add my data source. When you're adding a data source, you're basically saying, hey, OpenAI has already trained this model, but I want the model to have additional data available to it. And so you can create a new data source by uploading files, uploading or connecting it to Azure Blob Storage, or connecting it to Azure Cognitive Search. These are really three different things that all point to the same area. It all goes through Azure Cognitive Search. Azure Cognitive Search is a service that they give you through Azure AI Services that lets you do kind of contextual search on documents such as PDFs, Markdown files, and all sorts of crazy stuff. You can do a lot of really interesting data extraction through Azure Cognitive Search. But you can do upload files or blob storage, and it'll help you set up your Cog Search resource. I happen to have one already set up for me. And I have one here called Accessible AI. Accessible AI is my blog, or one of my blogs. This is my data science blog. So I have a lot of stuff out here on data science topics. I mentioned this because if I were to go to, let's see, projects, I'm talking so my brain doesn't work. I have a number of projects out here, including some projects on Die Hard. I have done some experiments where I proved that Die Hard was a Christmas movie using machine learning. I have not gotten the Nobel Peace Prize yet. I'm sure it's coming in the mail. But what I'm doing here is I'm actually connecting this playground, this agent, to a cognitive search resource that has been hooked up with the various markdown files from my blog. So it's indexed all those markdown files and knows all the things I've written about, and now it's going to have access to that particular type of thing. I'll leave these as blank. And now I'm choosing whether I want a keyword search or semantic search. Semantic is like meaningful. So this works with words that are not identical, but they mean the same thing. It's a little bit more expensive, but Microsoft is nice enough to pay for some of my expenses, so I'm okay with that. We'll save and close. And now I've got this data set hooked up here. And it's already indexed this because I set it up yesterday. But I could say here, what do you think about Die Hard? And I should get a different answer. Come on, demigods. So here we go. As a language model, yada, yada, yada. Azure Machine Learning use a trained model to evaluate whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. The model predicted that Die Hard is more likely considered a Christmas movie based on yada, yada, yada. So you can see it's getting my data out of my blog. And it's giving me these little footnotes here. So I can kind of see that a little bit, and I can click on references and find out exactly what it's referring to here. And it's actually quoting bits of my blog post on the topic. So you can kind of see that. Now I can ask it something that I don't have in my blog. So I can say, what kind of bubble gum does the last king of France chew? It tells me the requested information is not available in the retrieved data. So by default, once you hook up a Cog Services resource and you're giving it your own data, if it doesn't find it in your data, it gives you this exact response, right? There are ways of customizing that. I can't remember where they are. Yes, right here. So here, limit your responses to data context. And here I'll ask it, what gum does the King of France like? So there we go. It's able to riff a little bit more with that. So if you wanted to hook up a data source, it works with PDFs, it works with Markdown files, it works with, I think, Word documents, it works with a number of different data sources, and so you can hook up your organization's data. Now, you can't use the free plan on Cog Services with OpenAI, so you are limited to using one of the paid ones, and they start at $75 a month. So this is a feature that you will have to pay for at least a certain amount of money. Additionally, there are limits around the maximum size of resources you can attach to these things in Cog Services. I'm not a cognitive services expert, but you can work with it there. But for organizations that are looking to hook up their data, this is a really easy way of doing it. And basically what it does is it does retrieval augmented generation, where I ask it what gum does the King of France like, and it basically goes out and it searches cognitive services to see, hey, in our data set, do we have anything on that? Okay, no, we don't. or oh yeah, we do know a little bit about Die Hard. And so that's how we're able to provide some examples. And it's basically like it says, the King of France likes Zuka gum. Save it. Try it again. Ah, demo gods have failed me. But essentially, that's what it does. It takes that data, it retrieves it, and it adds it to the system grounding information, right? So because of that, you're able to add in more data than your model was originally trained with. So that the number one question I get from folks is, how do I control what it does? How do I give it data? Depending on what your use case is, you can either uh, leave this checked or unchecked. If you really don't want it to do anything at all with the beyond its bounds, you can check this box and maybe even increase the strictness to make it a little bit more strict on things. But this is the number one way of having it constrained to your organization's needs and your organization's data. And as you add more data to that cognitive services resource, it's going to automatically update, the next time someone interacts with your chatbot, which is pretty cool. The other question people ask me is basically, Matt, how do I control what this thing says? Let's say the thing is starting to cuss out the users. We really don't want that. There's this area of content filters, which I cannot click on to show you because that's in preview. Basically, I'm going to show you things that I've seen in the documentation, just to make sure that I'm not crossing any bounds on things I'm not allowed to talk about. But content filters essentially limit what the bot is allowed to receive from the user and what the bot is allowed to say to the user. And there's some major content areas that they filter on, such as self-harm, hate speech, violence, sexual content, things like that. So if you're trying to build something that is a therapy bot or a medical bot, or you're talking about reporting a crime, you might need to talk about violence, right? And so you might be able to up the content filter or lower the content filter so that your bot is okay talking about that stuff. Microsoft is of course keeping that pretty close right now, and they really don't want any of these things to be abused by people, which I really commend. But you'll probably have to apply for permission to modify these types of things. But you can make your bot really, really, really restricted if you want to, which is nice. So I see question in chat. Given multiple sources, can you only do search on one data source with context? Or how do you hook up multiple user-specific data sources? It is possible. So the way that you'll hook that stuff up is you would go into your cog services resource, and you would have some indexes, which I am awful at cognitive services. Oh, no, that's cognitive search is what I'm looking for. Sorry. So you can have multiple things inside of this bucket, and it's going to find all of them. This in particular is looking at it's looking at a particular container in Azure for this specific one. So let me see. I think this is my guy. I go to storage browser, blob containers. Nope, wrong one. I got two resources here and they confuse me. Containers, accessible AI. Basically, you could add another piece of data here, right? I think you are limited only to one index per bot right now is the limit. So, but anything you can fit into one index in cognitive search is going to work out for you. So for me, as I add a new blog post, I just upload it here, and an hour or less, it's indexed, and the bot's able to respond on things. But if you're trying to look at multiple containers, that may or may not be possible. I'm not sure. I'm not very good with cognitive search yet. That's maybe my weakest area of Azure AI at the moment. But it's all powered by that resource. So hopefully that answered that question. Um, One of the cool things about this is you can actually take these things and deploy them as a web application. So you can deploy it to a new web application. So you can say, hey, I really like being able to interact with this thing. I want to deploy it as a new one. Um, I actually had one open earlier, and I don't see it anymore. Uh, yeah, I'm not sure why I don't see that. Let me see if I can find it in the Azure portal. Um, you can basically create an easy web app out of all this stuff. Not Cog Services demo. I want to find Sidekick Storage. I want to find AI Sidekick. I should have a web app here. So it created a chat app here. Let's see if this takes me to the interaction page. Doesn't. I'll just have to describe it to you. Yay, cool. So here I can say, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Enter like you're a cat. Yep. So in this particular case, I guess it's not finding it in my data for whatever reason. I'm not sure. But I'm able to take a model and deploy it out here and interact with it in a web application. And you can generate one of these things just by having good settings here and clicking deploy to a new web app or a new virtual assistant bot. Would this only take text input? Um, so you're talking a little bit about multimodal input, which is what GPT-4 supports. GPT-4 is on Azure in preview. I don't feel comfortable sharing it in a recorded user group. I'm not sure where the NDA it ends and begins. But it is there. I can tell you that right now, multimodal input is not supported in Azure. I am certain it's going to come at some point, but it's not there yet. So multimodal meaning text or image. So right now, it is not possible in Azure to upload an image, but I am very confident that it will be present in the future. Can we feed SQL database scripts to get our queries? Is it private to your organizations only? So two separate things. Yes, it is private to your organization only. So this data is all your data only, right? And if you can connect a SQL database script or a SQL database source to your cog search, then yes, I think you can. But again, I'm not very good at cognitive search. I need to get better at it now because now I see, oh, I could build a really amazing app with it. So that's an area I need to grow in. But I believe it is possible to integrate cog search and SQL. But it may refresh periodically, if that makes sense. So let's talk about images because I know the documentation covers it, so I can talk about it. Dolly is up there. So Dolly is like Midjourney or things like it. You can actually go out there and generate an image. So I can describe something like a bald man talking to a computer screen at a user group. And click generate, and we'll see what it does. No reason why I picked that particular topic. But it's using AI and generative models to generate an image. So yeah, there we go. It's pretty good. So I can download that. I can work with this. I really like this, and I like that it even keeps the prompt here in my history. The thing I really wish that I could do that I can't yet is I don't believe I can choose non-square aspect ratios. I really want to have like a 4:3 aspect ratio for like thumbnails on blog posts and things like that. I can't do it yet. So right now I haven't cut over to using Dolly for my image generation. I'm still using Midjourney for that because I can use a custom aspect ratio. But it's really cool that I can do it in Azure, and it's super cool that I've got like this the history of my prompts that I used for it. So if I wanted to generate another one, I could do that right there. Sound effects important. Come on, big money. That's oddly horrifying. Okay. Generative AI, ladies and gentlemen. And code for it too. So you can actually use Python code. I believe they have Python and REST as examples right now for this. But you just make a request out to this endpoint with a request that looks like this. In is the number of images to generate, and you get your supported sizes, and your prompt goes right here. So really easy REST request where you got to authenticate with your key and your endpoint. But that's super cool. I'm very much a fan of this. Um, so yeah, that's sort of what we got going on there. What questions do we have so far about things related to chat or Dolly or anything else? I am both a retired teacher and a terrier owner, so I can be stubborn too. But I shall move on. So chat is what most people are familiar with, but we can also do completions, and this maybe gets you thinking about generative AI a little bit differently. So here I'm choosing which deployment I want. The only one that can support completions that I've deployed is my instruct model. This is this model right here. This is the GPT Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3.5 Turbo Instruct model. So the Instruct model can do completions, and these other ones can do, well, these two anyway can do chat. Um, so here I've got this model. It's got an example here. I'm just going to get rid of all that. I can say um, user. This is a turnip. Classification. User. I ate a tomato. Classification. Fruit. User. I am Batman. Classification. Non-fruit. User. I saw a squirrel. Classification. I'll hit generate. And what this is doing is it's basically showing a pattern to the model and getting a completion back. So hopefully we're going to see non-fruit. I've not tried this one, so demo gods will see what it does. Hey, non-fruit, cool. So this is not just about chatting. This can be done. You can use this to find patterns. You can use this to do lots of really clever things. So let's see if it can find patterns in a number. Number one, number two, number three. Do this Fibonacci sequence. We'll see what it does here. See if that's good. Should be 13. Yeah, okay. It found okay. boy, did it find a lot of them. So generative AI is not generally good with math, but here it was actually able to find enough examples, probably in its training data, that it was able to generate these things, right? So you can use generative AI in really creative ways to accomplish custom tasks. And if I wanted it to limit itself, I could have, maybe decrease the max length here. That would have helped me a little bit there. They have a lot more examples here, so let's take a look at some of the built-in examples. A lot of these are kind of the things you might do with ChatGPT. The things that really interest me are the things where you give it kind of a very different format than you might see in a chat interaction, and just see how the bot works. Like classification was a really good one. Is the person going to default on a load, or are they not? That kind of thing. So that's completions. It's less attractive than chat to most users, but I think that if you apply completions in creative ways, you can get some very interesting outputs. Now, the downside of all of this stuff is that it's really lightning in a bottle, and you don't quite know exactly how it works. And so that's where this chain of thought reasoning kind of comes in. This one here is basically encouraging it to explain itself and how it's doing its reasoning. Um, any AI system is going to get it wrong some of the time. You, as an organization, need to be okay with that if you want to deploy these solutions. That's why we like human in the loop solutions, where it's doing something to help a human, such as GitHub Copilot is a good example of that, where it's generating code with you, but you're verifying the code that it's generating is correct. That's one that I've gotten a lot of value out of. So that's completions. And really, when you think about chat is really just completions with lipstick, right? Um, that's all it is. Every time we're sending a chat session, we're sending the history of the chat up to that point, and then getting back a completion representing this. That's really what ChatGPT is. It's just completions with lipstick. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about in OpenAI is quotas. Quotas basically let you you have a certain amount of tokens available to you for your Azure account, and you can determine, how much of those tokens go to which thing. This is really not an area you're going to have to care a whole lot about unless you're deploying multiple production models that are getting a lot of use. You can ask to up your quota if you need more than 240,000 requests a second or tokens a second or whatever it might be. So that's an area I haven't needed to work with yet. But you can distribute your quota between all your different models that you have available to you. So that's something to work with. Um, I'm going to switch gears here in a second, and I'm going to show you briefly a very strange application that I work with. I like to teach Azure AI in the community, and one of the talks that I use for that involves basically making an AI application that pretends it's my dog. I was thinking about all the things my dog can do. He can watch out the window and see squirrels, and if he sees them, he barks. He can listen to me and the words that I say, and he understands the words I say, and sometimes interacts with me. There's a lot of things he does. And so to demonstrate like all the Azure AI services, I built this little application that thinks it's a dog, which is just a ridiculous way of using my time. But this application uses OpenAI from .NET Code. So I'm going to run this application, and you're not going to hear it, unfortunately, but I'll run it, and we'll take a look at how it's using OpenAI and the code very briefly for that. And then we'll close with a brief discussion of Azure Machine Learning Studio. And as always, heckle me, questions. I get bored talking to myself. Okay, so I just heard in my speakers a very loud welcome to Doggos where the bark is as friendly as the bites. Pun intended, I'm sure. Well, actually not intended because it's just an autocomplete, but this is an application that was able to greet me. I'm going to turn off the speech because it's going to really distract me and you can't hear it anyway. So I'll turn, no barking, there we go. So interacting with this application, if I go back over to it, I could say, where are we right now? I'm running right here on this computer, but most of my doggy brain is stored across a bunch of Azure data centers in the US, yada, 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 yada. I was hoping it was going to talk about the Cleveland Azure user group. Yeah, there we go. We're at the Azure Cleveland user group. It's a awesome community of tech enthusiasts who love all things Azure. Woof, woof. So why does OpenAI think it's a dog? Well, because I gave it a prompt that says, pretend you are an application named Doggos that happens to be a dog, yada, yada, yada. I gave it a little bit of information about the user group. Yeah, right here. So people are interacting with you at this user group online. Give it a little bit of a direction on its personality. And I'm able to generate responses and things like that. So you asked earlier about photos. You can't actually send it a photo yet, but you can get around that a little bit. So here is a picture of my dog listening. And Azure AI Vision, which is the course I'm about to create and the book I'm about to create, is able to generate a lot of insights about this image. It's not the subject of this talk, but it is pretty cool to see what it can do. it got that wrong. He's actually a Cairn Terrier, but I can understand the Yorkie there. Um, but the caption here is a dog sitting on the floor. That's what Azure AI Vision saw. And so I'm prompting OpenAI. I'm saying the user just showed you an image. Computer vision describes the image as a dog sitting on the floor. Describe this image in your own words. If it has anything a dog would be excited about, react to that. And the response I got back from OpenAI is, "Oh, I see the image. It's a doggo sitting on the floor. How awesome!" As a dog myself, I totally understand the joy of sitting on the floor. It's a comfy spot for us to relax and play. Woof woof. So OpenAI never saw the image, but it saw the description of the image. And the way that it was able to get that description was I made a call out to Azure AI Vision, and that gave me back information about the vision. My C# code then took that and generated a prompt around it, fed it to OpenAI. OpenAI was able to react to it. So you can kind of chain some of these things together to get a good result, if that makes sense. Very bizarre application, very bizarre way of using my time. And it's so weird to me whenever I get to travel to conferences. And I was like, yeah, please come to our conference and talk about your dog. Like, okay, cool. So this is cool. I think right now I don't have this set up to talk about Die Hard. So I'm going to say, tell me about Die Hard. And I got back a content filtering. It didn't like the word die. It thought I was talking about death and violence and uh, yeah, it wasn't happy about that. So let's try to be a little bit more explicit. Tell me about the movie Die Hard. Is it a Christmas movie? Ah, there we go. Uh, so it's not certain. It gives me a good OpenAI answer. Kind of cool. But that's because I haven't hooked up cognitive search. So let's take a look at the code, and then I'll change it to hook up cognitive search, and we'll ask it the same question.
I got
So
a
I have
question.
some, please, happy to help.
Did you feed the dog voice to some AI agent? Like
I,
you have the listen button over there, so you can listen to the voice, right? So
yeah,
did you try
so
to feed it to the AI agent
yeah,
and know the difference in between emotions?
so you're talking about the listening capability of the application. I didn't actually show you that, but what it does is it uses Azure AI speech to text to listen to what I'm saying and transcribe it into a string. Now that string that it gets doesn't have any sort of emotional tags associated with it. So that was sort of me just hamming it up for you all. So it doesn't have tone or anything like that. That would be really amazing. But no, it just takes the raw text as string. So if you're sarcastic, yeah, it's not going to have that. I'll try that, and next time I run it, we'll see if it works. I'm not sure it's going to work because I'm using my microphone for Zoom or not Zoom. Um,
Oh, great, thank you.
yeah, sure. So here's my various prompts that I'm creating. We talked about that earlier. What I'm doing is I have an OpenAI client. I'm saying, hey, here's my endpoint for this client. That's the endpoint we saw in the web. Um, I've got this chat completion options, and I've got this creds. The creds has a key. That's my OpenAI key, which I'm not going to hover over because I think it's going to actually show you the string. Oh no, that one it reads from a resource. One of these I hacked together last night, and it's just a raw string in the code, which I'm not going to show you. But then I'm saying, hey, I want to do some chat completions. Um, I want you to only present the user one suggested choice. It might give you like 3 or 4 different responses that you could evaluate if you wanted to do that. That doesn't usually make sense in a chat kind of a user interface, so you go with one choice. The maximum tokens I want to generate is 120. I wanted to keep it fairly constrained. Usually I have this about 80 for this application, but I upped it because some of the things it quotes can get a little long when I turn on the cog search. And then I give it the system message. And then when I want to get a completion from it, I just say, hey, give me my chat completion. Here's the model name. So by default, the model name is going to be, or this is actually a deployment name, not a model name, is GPT-3.5 Turbo. So this might be Cleveland AZ or whatever you called your model when you deployed it in Azure, in OpenAI. And then You can say, hey, give me the response, and then it gives you back some choices. I'm only getting back one choice, so I'm getting the first one from the array, and then I just get the text right there. Now, there's some interesting things coming back now that I've been playing with this with cog search enabled. So here, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to actually enable cog search. And now I'm telling it, hey, you have a cognitive search resource. Here's its URL. Here's the index I want you to care about. Here's the key I want you to use. This is the access key for your cognitive search resource, so different than your OpenAI resource. And then should restrict result scope. That's basically, I think, I just turned this on right before this group, so I've not tested this at all. I think this is the equivalent of that box in the web portal that says limit me to these results. So we're going to run this again, and I'll try the audio this time, and we'll ask it about Die Hard, and it should give me back more information. That was pretty funny how it content filtered to that before. The only other time I'd seen it done that is when I told it I was interacting with it with my webcam, and it thought I was talking about other uses of the webcam, and it says, "Oh, nope, not going there." But yeah, it will tell you if it doesn't like what you're doing. My application here doesn't format it very well when it does, but it will do that. So here we go. I'll try to listen here. What can you tell me about the movie Die Hard? I don't think that's working. Yeah, I don't think that's working. I think I'm gonna have to kill that application. Really doesn't like to work. But if I wasn't at a user group using my microphone, it does work. I can tell you that. It just really doesn't like what I'm trying to do right now. So where is? Sorry, I'm scrolling through Task Manager over here on my other monitor. By the way, pro tip: if you hold down Control in Task Manager, it will stop the auto refreshing, which is nice. Come on, you can do it. Kill that task with fire. There we go. All right, we'll run it again. Sorry about that. It does work, but yeah, it doesn't contain the emotions. So here I'm going to say, what can you tell me about Die Hard? It says, according to the information I found, Die Hard is considered a Christmas movie with over 95% confidence. And then Doc 1 in brackets, right? So Doc 1, that's just basically saying, hey, here's the reference thing I found that tells me a little bit more about it. So I can say, what are some classification metrics I might care about in machine learning? I'm asking it things I've written about before, so it can find results on that. And here we see it's gotten Doc 3, Doc 3, Doc 3. I'm not sure where Doc 1 and 2 went, but we can see it was able to sort of measure things. And I think we actually hit the token cutoff here, which is why this is sort of cut off mid-sentence and where we don't see Doc 1 and 2. The response does give me back like information about these things in JSON format. I actually just was playing with this for the first time yesterday, so I don't have this displaying nicely here, but we have the same kind of experience we had on the web where we have like that data coming back. So you'll have to do a little bit more work formatting the response and referencing what it's referring to. But this is really how things like Bing Chat work, where they have these embedded things like Doc3. Pretty cool stuff. Now, does the King of France chew gum? If the requested information is not in the retrieved data, please try another query or topic. Sounds nothing at all like a dog. That's just sort of a hard-coded string for if it didn't find what I had, and I'm restricting it to its data. So we're going to say should restrict to result scope. We'll try false, and I think that's going to free us up a little bit. We'll try the same question. By default, it's true. Okay. Does the King of France chew gum? So it's a little bit more free to explore and answer things. So I think I would generally prefer to leave that to false or unchecked, so it can give me natural responses to things it doesn't know about. But I could see some very controlled scenarios where you might want to leave that restricted. So hey, you're only going to talk about things you have in your knowledge base, and you're only going to cite those sources. If you really don't want it to ever be wrong, that's what I would do. But honestly, it loses a lot of the power of these large language models that have these contextual responses, which is pretty cool. But if you have a sufficiently large knowledge base, then yeah, that could work for you. So that's our second third of this talk. Our third third of this talk is going to be mostly talking and less demos, but this is Azure Machine Learning Studio. I do a lot of things in here with machine learning tasks, with regression, classification, time series forecasting, image classification. A lot of things like that are in this user interface. Okay. Now, Microsoft is spending a lot of development effort expanding Machine Learning Studio to have more capabilities, including things around generative AI. I'm only going to talk to you about things that I've seen in our documentation, not things that I've been playing with or other things, but the model catalog is one of those things I've seen in the documentation. Model catalog lets you go out there and take a look at all of the large language models or generative AI models, that are out there, and you can take a look at them and get more details on them. We've got a lot of little icons here. This here is a meta icon. This here would be a Hugging Face icon. These green ones are curated by Azure. There are Azure OpenAI ones here, so we can see we got a lot of GPTs. So we can filter it down. Let's say we want to find something that does zero-shot classification and is by Hugging Face. They're all by Hugging Face. That's okay. Let's say that we wanted to do zero-shot classification, and yeah, I don't know what half of these things are. There's a whole lot of stuff out there in machine learning to learn. Let's just pick this one at random. So it tells you a little bit more about this model. It tells you where to find the model card. I don't like that. I want to find something that has the model card built into it. So let's try again. Zero-shot classification. Let's take a look at this guy. So here's a more classical model card. It tells you, hey, here's what a sample input looks like. Here's what a sample output looks like. Usually they'll give you some performance metrics. They'll give you a lot of information about them. Tells you a little bit more about the license for using this. But you can click deploy and actually try this out or evaluate it and test it on your data. Trying to remember the ones that I was playing with yesterday that worked pretty well for us. Curated by Azure. Let's try this guy. So here's one that actually lets you do a sample. Hello, how are you? And hopefully you get back a fine. But you can basically try out these models. Yeah, there we go. As far as I'm concerned, I'm well. Thank you for asking. And then you can try it again. Does the King of France chew gum? I don't know why I like King of France tonight, but that's what I like. Actually, that's a pretty good password. Nobody in the right mind is going to come up with that string, which is why I came up with it. And it's talking to this model. So this is not ChatGPT. This is a completely different model. This is the Databricks Dolly V2 12B model, which I've never seen before in my life. And it says, of course not, you fool. That's the 20th century. Pretty good answer. Better than what ChatGPT was able to give me, actually. And so you can evaluate whatever models might make sense for your organization. And so this is, I think, where a lot of the future is going beyond the basics. OpenAI Studio is very, very, very good for getting an organization into generative AI if they want to do the very popular things with GPT-3.5, GPT-4, things like that. If you want something a little bit more nuanced, something a little bit more productionized, Azure Machine Learning Studio is where you're going to want to go. So start in OpenAI and then migrate over here as your needs evolve. You can evaluate these models by giving it a data set. So we can say, hey, here's a bunch of inputs we've had from the user, generate a bunch of responses for these, and we'll evaluate how well they worked. If we really like this model, I can deploy it as a real-time endpoint, and now it's hosted out there, and I'm able to get responses from it basically by calling an API endpoint on an Azure Container Instance or Azure Kubernetes Service. Pretty cool stuff. And that's getting me back into how Machine Learning Studio has been used historically, where you train a model and then you deploy the model. Well, this is a pre-trained model. Nice stuff. So that's, I think, the extent that I am comfortable talking about this product. OpenAI Studio is a really good way of getting your organization into generative AI. If you want something really simple, play with something here, deploy it as a web service. You need to customize a little bit more. Well, now you're starting to add in your own data, your own system messages. You're starting to do little things. There's baby steps into this stuff, but this has a lot of built-in security and the filtering capabilities and all the things you'd expect from Azure. So that's all I have tonight on my random ramblings. Thank you for your patience. I hope this was informative. If you want to get in touch with me afterwards, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter at Integerman. I'm happy to help you with whatever you need.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Before we adjourn for the evening, just wanted to first of all ask, are there any questions or comments for Matt before we move on to our concluding slides? Looks like we have one more question, Matt.
How are the Copilot capabilities in Azure mainly different from the Azure AI services? As in, is it using the same technology in the backend? So I can't tell you how Copilot's implemented internally. I don't know how it's implemented internally. I can tell you that the Azure AI services are all using pre-trained models. So like they're using a pre-trained image model or pre-trained speech recognition model. So I would suspect it's a lot of the same infrastructure. The main difference is the stuff I showed you in Azure Machine Learning Studio is going to be a little bit more transparent in how it works versus the curated stuff with the Azure AI services. I found the Azure AI services to be fantastic, but if you need something custom, then that's where you'd go.
Okay. Very good. Any additional questions or comments? And you can do it either in chat or speak up verbally. And it looks like there are no more comments. And before we wrap it up, just have a couple concluding announcements. So let me, if I may, go ahead and share my screen. And also, if you'll notice in chat that there's several links that I posted, and we'll cover those in just a second. So the recording of the presentation will be edited and uploaded. Please subscribe to the channel for upload notifications. And the link for that is in chat, as well as the link to my blog, which has the tech events that we'll cover in just a little bit. And again, if you subscribe to that, you'll be able to get updates as they're posted. Lastly, the feedback eval. If you would please take a moment to fill that out so we can provide Matt with some constructive criticism. For those that joined us after the start of the meeting, we do offer a 35% off of selection of books at Manning.com using the link and the discount code displayed on the slide and also in the chat window. As for tech events, on October 18th, which is next Wednesday, is the Akron Women in Technology. And although I'm not a woman, I will be presenting there on using AI and T-SQL. On October 19th, which is the Thursday following, is the Greater Lansing. I made the mistake there of calling it the Great Lakes User Group. But in any case, the Greater Lansing User Group will be meeting on that Thursday. And on October 26th will be the Cleveland C# User Group meeting, which I will be hosting. And the link for that is also provided in the chat as well as in the blog. As far as conferences, October 24th through the 26th is API World that meets in Santa Clara. And they had just sent me an email a few minutes ago stating that that meeting or that conference will be free of charge to attendees from this group. So if you're interested and want to visit Santa Clara and learn a few things from API World, you can do that free of charge. On October 27th in Columbus is the Cybersecurity Summit, which will include members from the FBI discussing cybersecurity, as well as a variety of experts from the security field. That will also be free using the discount code AITP23 Akron. And yes, we did get that from the Akron AITP group. October 31st through November 2nd is API World held online, and that is also free of charge to members of this group. On November 7th through the 10th is Tech Bash held in the Pennsylvania Poconos, and unfortunately that is not free of charge. That is a paid-for conference. November 14th through the 16th is .NET Conf, which will be a 3-day event, round-the-clock events and speakers from all over the world discussing the release of .NET 8 as well as a variety of topics related to that. So you can find all those links over on my blog. And as we always like to do, discuss job openings. You can find a variety of job openings at techsystems.com/IT-jobs, but always like to ask informally who's hiring and who's looking for work. So if you would please make yourself known either verbally or in chat. And
I can tell you, we are looking to hire a lead developer at Leading Edge. So if you are interested in consulting, you have a decent amount of experience in a variety of areas, hit me up on Twitter or LinkedIn or email. But I'd love to chat with you more.
Excellent. And is that mostly standard C# development or more into the AI realm?
That's a lot of .NET, a lot of Java, some DevOps. We're getting deeper and deeper into the AI realm. I'm our first AI specialist there, but it's a major focus area for us.
I see. Okay. Thanks for sharing that, Matt. Appreciate it. Anyone else? All right. If you do come across another job opening or you are looking for work, you can always reach out to me. snasser@NIS Technologies is my email. You can also find me on Twitter @SamNasser. And the link to my blog, which I also posted in chat. And lastly, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, I invite you to do so. And so with that, thanks again to Matt for presenting, and thank you all for attending, and look forward to seeing you at next month's meeting. Good night, everyone.